Thank you very much, and I greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk to the North Shipping Conference today. And I want to give some very brief comments and talk about technology and what we see in the future and how it's going to impact our industry. You know, when we look at next generation technology, we consider 6 things. First off, safety. Everybody here has talked about safety today. This has to be personnel safety, but I think one of the things we've learned from Macondo, it also has to be process safety. We have to take both of those things strongly in consideration. The second one's reliability. Technology that doesn't work right doesn't help anybody. You know, whenever you have serial number 1, there's always issues, but you have to ensure that this reliability is in place because that actually makes the operation of the process more safe. Third is we're getting a plethora of information. You know, how do we use that information? How do we still that information? What is that information telling us? Are we in fact getting too much information? I would argue everybody here that gets spam email knows what too much information is. How do we sort that out? How do we get the correct information? The environment. Making sure that our new technology is considering the environment, whether it's the Arctic, whether it's offshore Brazil, whether it's any area like that. Training. You've heard the previous speakers talk about it. What good is technology if people don't know how to run the equipment that you're putting out there? You know, are we making it safer? Are we telling them what to do? And finally is economics. And there's a reason I'm putting economics at the bottom. And John said it great on that panel right there. Too often we move economics to the top. And I think when we do that, we're making a huge mistake. So we have to ensure that we consider these things when we do technology. Now, I want to give you some examples of some of this technology today. You know, this is an example of a drill ship right here that when you take a look at it, it has a lot of the current technology. I think the advances that we're going to make in this industry will be iterative. They won't be complete breakthroughs. They're going to be things that we're going to build upon. What you'll see on this particular process here is note, there's nobody around the rotary table. So we're actually taking care of that safety element on the personnel. You know, one of the things when I briefed the Energy Secretary after Macondo, he was stunned to learn that people work 12-hour towers in the Gulf of Mexico. He was worried about the fatigue. Well, when you have mechanization like we're showing here, and when you're advancing this down the pike, you're really taking care of that fatigue. You're making it so people aren't going to be so tired that they're going to make the improper decision. And I think being able to work with that and being able to do things and mechanize it such that you almost have robotics out there, which will be the next big gain for us. Having the robotics that you take people completely away from the rotary table, that's where the technology is. That's going to reduce the number of decisions that need to be made by the people that are working on those ships. And as soon as you take out a lot of the personal interaction and the personal decisions, you really reduce the amount of mistakes that, in fact, can be made by personnel on the rig. You know, I talked about information. I think one of the things you definitely have to have is a centralized location to get all the information that's coming in from the rig. You know, today, we've got BOP information, we've got mud information, we've got 4 or 5 different people working on different elements of information. You've got to integrate that. You've got to have one system, and it's got to have common look, common feel. You should be able to go to a rig that Chevron's running, go to a rig that Petrobras is running, and at a minimum, see a common look, common feel so that people know what they're looking at and control things. And I think as you look at this technology, it all has to be brought together on that rig floor so that people can make the appropriate decisions. The alarms can be correct, people can see what needs to be done, and they can make those determinations so they can bring that information together and bring it to bear on what's going on downhole. You know, we've talked an awful lot about BOPs. You know, you've heard a lot about the BOPs in the Macondo. This is an example of one of the existing ones. You know, the Macondo BOP had 4 rams. Won't get too technical on you, but today it looks like we're going to go to 6 and sometimes 7. And what we're doing, though, is we're also figuring out different ways to monitor the BOP. You know, how can we read the sensors on the ocean floor? How can we use the pressure that the ocean floor has at 10,000 feet to make closing the BOPs that much better? You know, one of the things that the industry is trying to do is use black boxes. You know, we want to put a black box just like you have an airplane. If something goes wrong, we can retrieve that later and we can get lessons learned from that. We can learn what maybe the root cause might have been. You know, we have to have better controls that go down to the bottom. You know, we have to be able to get instantaneous results as to what those pressures are as we're reading those on the ocean floor. All the BOP manufacturers today are working on that. One of the things we're talking an awful lot about today are shear rams. Quite frankly, you never hope to use shear rams, but you have to have shear rams that can do a lot of things: cut through drill pipe, cut through tool joints, and cut through drill collars. The industry is working on those sorts of things, and I think that's the technology you're going to see in the future. We have so many drill ships out there today. We're now going to floating production systems, and we have to think about the environment and what happens in different environments when storms crop up. The Gulf of Mexico is a lot different environment than some of the benign waters off of West Africa, as an example. Then you have the Arctic, which is a totally different environment. And you take a look at concepts like this, where you've got the buoy on this floating production, storage, and offloading vessel, the FPSO, and you have that hooked up. Then all of a sudden, you've been producing for a period of time, and if a storm comes in, how are you going to get these vessels off location without having to worry about that storm creating pollution, causing another spill or whatever? And so you develop technology that allows you to disconnect things like the buoy here, so you continue to stay connected to your subsea systems, but at the same time now, you can disconnect, you can look at the storm, you can take off and get out of harm's way. I think this is the sort of thing that we have to do to be able to protect the environment. We need to make sure that these vessels are flexible, they can move in and out when they need to. And then finally, I think this is going to be the holy grail for all of us, and that's remote monitoring and remote operating of vehicles, of the drill vessels themselves. And I think that today we have a lot of this in place, but it goes back to what I talked about earlier on information. How do we bring that together? How do we bring it to bear? How can we monitor that from the shore? And how then, ultimately, I think where we want to be as an equipment manufacturer, I want to make equipment that doesn't need people running it. We can actually run it from the shore. You don't have anybody out there. If you get this information, tie it all together, have smart equipment, it's going to help the reliability, it's going to help the safety, it's going to help the economics, it's going to help everything that I showed you in the very first slide. So these are the types of things that the industry has to work on today, that we can ensure the advanced technologies that we're putting out there are going to answer a lot of the issues that people have after Macondo. And when you see these things, I think the industry is pushing hard to do it. Don't think about the economics solely. We have to consider it. But in fact, consider what are we doing to make this a better, safer, and a more professional industry. We've all talked about training. How are we going to make it better for the people that want to work here? How do we make it less physically taxing? How can we ensure that they make the proper decisions? So that's a quick run through on the technology, and I greatly appreciate your interest. Thank you very much.